Let's go to Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching, who's also the chair of the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee at Parliament. Good to speak to you again, Kimberley. I want to come to some other issues in a moment, but first up,
Thank you, Chris.
Staggered to see last night that one of your senatorial colleagues from the Greens has announced a policy to halve our defence spending, get rid of our plans for nuclear submarines, essentially just sit here, do some yoga and meditation and hope that nobody invades.
Well, I think they said, we could solve all of this by effective communication, thereby proving that the Greens should be nowhere near any government decision-making whatsoever, ever. I think they're all care and no responsibility. This is sort of like fairies at the bottom of the garden type of argument from them. And I think it's actually, there's a funny side to it because, when I read that, I thought in Ben Packham's piece in The Australian, I thought, really they'd be fine at Woodstock in 1969 wearing some tie-dyed clothing and some clogs, but really they shouldn't be anywhere near any serious decision-making that this country, that we have to make for our national security and for the safety of Australians. And the Greens, this is just, I think, as Brendan O'Connor said, this is just delusional.
It must worry you, though, because you say they shouldn't be near any government decision-making, but you don't get to form government unless you get preferences and support from the Greens, probably in both chambers these days. There'll be a couple of Greens in the lower house, but obviously you need their support in the Senate to get anything through. So, these are your running mates, and they come out with this sort of crazy stuff.
Well, no, not running mates, and I can assure you, Chris, that my view has always been, I was on the Melbourne City Council with a Green, that we don't want them anywhere near us. And Anthony Albanese has said the same thing, perhaps more nicely than that, but we don't want them anywhere near a Labor government at all.
Well, that's a fine sentiment, but last time Labor was in government, there were those famous scenes of Julia Gillard with Bob Brown and others coming together to impose with the wattle, to impose a carbon tax that she'd promised not to impose. So she effectively had a quasi-coalition with the Greens back then. Are you saying never again?
Never again. And Anthony Albanese has said the same thing. Never again. We won't be doing that. No more wattle ceremonies.
Cooperate with them on getting to net zero by 2050, presumably.
The ALP has its own policies. Sometimes both the government, we've seen the government come to our policy position really over climate, haven't we, in the last few weeks. And it's good that they're there. It's taken them 8 years to get here, but it's good that they're here. So, they're, hopefully in Glasgow, the Prime Minister, when he attends, I think will, make that commitment. And I think, what we're seeing with the National Party, I think that's going to be a very expensive exercise for the Liberal party room.
Yeah, well, keep an eye on that. There's no doubt the government has conceded to the arguments of its opponents when it comes to the 2050 target, and there's no doubt there's going to be some boondoggles for the Nats, I suppose, to get this through. So the focus is switching to the 2030 target. To me, this is fascinating, right? Because if you want to, as Labor, if Labor wants to neutralise the issue, then you can just match the government's targets and say that you can be trusted on this and you neutralise climate as a political issue at the next election. But if you want to have the fight, you'll stick to your ambitious 2030 targets, as 45% by 2030. Do you think that Labor should stick to that more ambitious 2030 target?
Look, well, Chris Bowen will be making that announcement, and that's appropriate that he do that. That's his policy area. And can I say that I think Chris has been a breath of fresh air in this argument, in this debate around climate. Chris is, focused on jobs. That is what the Labor Party is all about. It is about jobs for working Australians, and that is what Chris has been doing. And I think, in your column, Chris, on the weekend in The Australian, you said that, really, I think I'm paraphrasing, obviously, your elegant writing, but you said that there are Australia that's sort of divided over this, people who don't really have to look at their weekly budget, and those that are aware of absolutely aware of every dollar they have to spend on a quarterly bill. So I think this has to be a policy area that benefits all Australians. And from what I can see from the debate that's been going on, I think particularly fiercely over the last few weeks, is that it is Labor that is talking about jobs. It is Labor that is saying that we need more manufacturing jobs in this country. And, I've got an inquiry in the Economics Committee in the Senate on manufacturing in Australia, on sovereign capability. And I think that inquiry will flesh out some of these issues. But I think that's what Australians want. And it's been the Labor Party that's been actually advocating for jobs and jobs. You know, we need these jobs. I mean, there's a lot of people in insecure work, you know, who can't get enough hours in a week.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I think that 2030 target will speak everything, I think. Thanks so much for joining us again, Senator.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Senator Kimberley Kitching there. Elegant writing. That'll get her on every week, you reckon. Look, this is the interesting thing to watch, right? Everyone's talking about 2050. Yes, 2050, the government's caving into what all the Greens and Labor want, right? But it's a long way off. 2030 is important. If Labor stick with their ambitious, some would say crazy, 45 to 50% target for 2030, that signifies Labor wants the fight, wants a fight on climate policy, a fight where ambitious action has usually lost over the past decade. But if Labor just want to neutralise the issue, they say forget about 2030. They agree with the government's targets to 2030. That's up to 28% cuts, which will do in a canter. And they match the government when it comes to 2050. That takes all the sting out of the issue, and the election is fought on other issues. That's the one to watch, and we won't know the answer for some time now.